Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank my colleague from Ohio for his statement and his concerns, and I'm here today to join him on the floor to oppose Chad Readler's nomination to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. And I call on every Republican who said they were going to fight for families' health care coverage, protections for people with pre-existing conditions, to prove they meant it by joining us. I've heard my Republican colleagues claim time and time again they care about protections for people with pre-existing conditions. I've heard them say they want to tackle those skyrocketing health care costs. I've heard them say they want to help people get the care they need. But when push comes to shove, I have yet to see them join Democrats, actually vote to make that happen. In fact, they do have a long track record of working to move us in exactly the opposite direction. People across the country have not forgotten how they had to speak up and stop Republicans from jamming through that awful Trump care bill, which would have spiked premiums and gutted Medicaid and put families back at the mercy of big insurance companies who could jack up prices for people with pre-existing conditions. And those people also will not forget if Republicans decide to ignore them again and rally around this judicial nominee who wants to do the same damage. Because let's be clear, Chad Readler's nomination is the latest test of whether Republicans are serious about fighting for people's health care, and every Republican who supports him is failing yet again. Make no mistake, Chad Readler has not only championed some of President Trump's most alarming steps, like his travel ban, his family separation policy, his efforts to undermine protections for LGBTQ people, and more. He has also been President Trump's right-hand man when it comes to undermining health care for people in this country. When the Trump administration decided to abandon protections for people with pre-existing conditions in court and throw its weight behind a lawsuit that would strike them down, Chad Readler signed on to the briefing defending the decision. It is a brief that 3 other Justice Department officials refused to sign, and one even resigned over it. But Chad Readler led the Trump administration's legal argument for striking down protections for people with pre-existing conditions. That will increase costs and throw health care for millions of people into utter chaos. It was an argument one of my Republican colleagues, as you just heard, called as far-fetched as any I have heard. And I agree, it is far-fetched, which is why it is also far-fetched for any Republican who votes to confirm Readler to continue pretending that they care about protections for people with pre-existing conditions or helping families get affordable health care. The choice to me is pretty simple and straightforward. You cannot be for protections for people with pre-existing conditions and for making someone who wants to strike them down a circuit judge. You cannot fight for families' health care and vote to empower the very people who've been leading the charge to undermine it. You can't vote for Readler and stand with those families. People across the country are watching this vote closely. They know, despite Republicans' promises to fight for their health care, when it matters, like it does here, when the care they need is truly online, Republicans have not come through for them. I hope that changes today. I hope instead of breaking their word and voting once more for President Trump's agenda of chaos and healthcare sabotage, live up to the promises. Join us, people across the country, and oppose Readler's nomination. Now, Mr. President, before I wrap up, I want to talk about the larger issue here, because Readler's not only alarming and not the only alarming judicial nominee from President Trump. Just last week, in fact, Republicans jammed through, just this week, jammed through Allison Rushing, she's an incredibly inexperienced circuit court nominee who's voiced some incredibly alarming ideological views, especially for women and the LGBTQ community. Later this week, we expect to vote on Eric Murphy. He's another nominee who has taken extreme positions on women's health care, from endorsing misinformation by signing on to briefs that cite false claims about women's health to standing in support of laws that were found to unconstitutionally infringe on women's reproductive rights and against laws to increase access to contraceptive care. People across the country have been absolutely clear they do not want to see our courts lurch to this far right. They know this is a threat. It's a threat to women. It's a threat to our workers and our families and our environment and so much more. So Democrats are here. We're going to keep standing up and fighting back every time President Trump and Senate Republican leaders try to move us in that direction. And I hope that some Republicans will do the right thing and stand with us. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.